The month of February is here, and as long as you don't have ice on your ponds or lakes, there is always a chance to go catch a fish, even if it's freezing cold. Although for some of us, as you can tell, I'm in shorts and a t-shirt, it might be pretty warm this month. So in today's video, instead of breaking down my recommendations based on what region of the country you are fishing in, I wanna do it based on what the weather is doing to your water temperature. Is it rapidly cooling? Is it heating up? Or is it staying neutral? My name's Tyler, and let's talk about it. Another giant, another giant. Look at that, y'all. I can't believe what I just caught. Yes! Well, what's going on, folks? Welcome back to Tyler's Reel Fishing. My goal with every single video is that you become a better bass angler. So if that's what you're all about, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Now, I want to address real quick, I sound like I'm sick. I don't feel like it, but I woke up sounding like this, and so this is what you're stuck with today.
That's where I learned to smoke cigarettes without using my hands.
And as usual with the lure recommendation videos, it is sponsored by the app that I co-own, Bass Forecast. Now, what you're seeing here is a screen recording of the Bass Forecast app, and our entire goal is to use past, present, and future weather data. As you can see here, I'm scrolling up to 10 days in advance to help you understand how the bass should be reacting on a certain body of water that you are fishing. So I'm gonna go to Dallas, Texas, where I live. I'm gonna scroll towards, look at that, Sunday the 8th, a 3.0 rating, Monday the 9th, a 6.5 rating. Why is that? Well, Sunday, if I go to the rating, it says pre-spawn, post-frontal conditions, and then the next day, says pre-spawn, half moon, rapidly falling barometer. That is the change of the weather there, causing the bass here in Dallas to probably act differently from Sunday to Monday. And so if I'm gonna plan which fishing days I'm gonna go, I might just go both, but you know what? It looks like Monday and Tuesday might be better than Saturday and Sunday. And I know not everybody has that liberty to choose which days you wanna go fishing, but whether or not you do, Bass Forecast can absolutely help you. The premium version that gets you all the baits, you can toggle from winter, spawn, pre-spawn based on whether you think your body of water may be a little ahead of the algorithm or behind. And with every single lure, there is video instructionals made by yours truly, teaching you how to fish every single lure category out there. There are just so many awesome features on this app. And again, I'm a co-owner of it, so I would really appreciate it if you would go in that link down below and at least check out the free version, but there's so much good value in the premium. Now let's get on to talking about why I separated this episode instead of into regions, into water temperature. And that is because, as I talked about in my winter masterclass video that I just released on the channel, if you haven't seen that, pause this video. I will have it linked down there in the video description, or just search Tyler's Reel Fishing Winter Masterclass. I talked about in that video the fact that we have so much weather changes throughout the winter that yes, all of us to a certain extent in the lower 48, as long as you have open water to fish, are experiencing some kind of cold weather fishing, especially in February. You have temperatures going up and down, and so that's why I decided, you know what, it's best to talk about how the fish are reacting based on the three different types of water movement. You have your stationary water, your cooling water, and your warming, and maybe a special section at the end. But I say all that to say that weather and water temperature truly drives fish behavior, and that's why I'm doing this. So let's start with probably the toughest and the one that none of us want to talk about, but it happens a lot this month, and that is cooling water. And on that B-roll spinning shot there, you saw three different lures that really all kind of encompass one category, and I'm gonna call that the minnow category, the shad category. And the reason why I'm including all three of those, again, not that other lures can't work. I have a drop shot over here, and do I ever have a drop shot not tied on if I have multiple rods in my kayak, or especially the bank of the boat? Of course not. I've always got a drop shot. But I think for the vast majority of us, when water is cooling down, usually accompanied by some sort of a cold front and usually has wind, a lot of that stuff can just move fish around. And so by moving your lures, not being so sedentary and making really slow casts in one specific area for a long time, by kind of covering water per se, you're gonna have a better chance of intercepting some fish as that cold water moves those fish around, whether from one location to the other or from one water depth in the column to the other. Cold weather absolutely moves fish around, and it also affects how the bait fish survive. The bait fish have to group closer together. Oftentimes, if it's a crazy extreme cold front, a lot of bait fish in shallow water can just exhibit dying off behaviors, if not totally die off. And so that's why I have the Alabama rig, the jig head minnow, and then the underspin slash kind of jig head swim bait category. Now, if you're a non-forward facing sonar user or you're a bank fisherman, I would say the jig head swim bait or the underspin category is the one you want to focus on most. Now, a lot of folks don't think you can throw an Alabama rig in shallow water and in your pond. You absolutely can. The way you do it, at least to get it higher in the column, is to have the top two baits on your Alabama rig called dummies. They have no jig head on them. They are just a screw lock that goes into your swim bait. So they're nice and secure on there, but there's no weight added to them. And then for the three swim baits on the bottom, heck, you could do two more dummies on the bottom and just one hook on the back. Most of the time, the fish are going to eat looking up at your bait. And so having three on there is beneficial if your state allows it. And I'm talking 1/8 ounce at a maximum, but like probably 16th, maybe even 32nd ounce hooks on those jig heads. And you can throw that in ponds as long as you don't let it get near the bottom. I know I talk a lot in videos about making sure your bait gets near the bottom. With this one, just for the sake of not losing a whole bunch of money in Alabama rigs, just let it sink for 1 to 3 seconds and start your retrieve back to you. You'll be surprised what you can catch from the bank on the Alabama rig. But in general, I would just say because of the water cooling down, it affects bait fish, moves everything around, especially if you have forward facing sonar. I will have a B-roll little section on the screen right now showing one of the biggest fish catches here you'll see on the channel over the next few videos that I caught on the jig head minnow when there was still ice on the ground from the recent Texas snowpocalypse or icepocalypse, whatever you want to call it, that we had. And the fish did not want any other lure besides a small minnow presentation. And that's why I say in cooling water, you want to stick to minnow presentations. Now, can a suspending jerkbait work in cooling water? Yes, it can. Can a flat-sided crankbait work? Of course it can. Can skipping a jig around work? Probably less so, but yes, a jig can still work in cooling water. I would just recommend going a little bit more, I wouldn't even call it reactionary. I don't think a underspin or a jig head swimbait is reactionary at all, but especially if you've got clear water and it's cooling down from a currently actively happening cold front, I would stick with mostly shad variations of lures. Now, what happens is that cold front blows through and then you have very high pressure. The barometric pressure is very high. Those bass become, I wouldn't say sedentary, but they don't move around as much. You can't catch them nearly as good. I mean, thanks to forward-facing sonar on bass boats and kayaks, we can see them better during these post-frontal, not a cloud in the sky type of days, but the fishing is still tougher on average. And so what lures do you throw when that happens? Well, that would be these lures right here in the consistent water. Now again, the water I'm talking about here may be still extremely frigid, but you just haven't had a cold front to knock the water temperature down in a few days, and the water's kind of been the same general temperature. Maybe in the afternoon it rises by 3 to 4 degrees, but of course the nighttime temperatures bring that water temperature right back down. And so when that happens, the lures that I like to throw are kind of a mixture of these shad variations, but also I would say a little bit more reactionary. The fish may be more used to the water, the temperature, and also water color. They may be moving around a little bit more. They may have kind of advanced back into shallower areas. And so that is when a suspending jerkbait, especially in consistent water temperature times, I would say you probably have less wind because wind tends to drive water temperatures down, and that would put us back in the previous category. And so I like to throw a suspending jerkbait, especially in ponds. It is surprising me how little people still throw, that sounded weird, how little people, dang it, nobody clip that please. How very infrequently people are fishing a suspending jerkbait in ponds, not always the KVD 200 or 300 that has 3 hooks here, especially not the deep diving jerkbaits, but a 2-hook shallow diving jerkbait can catch so many fish in the winter. It is almost always tied on when I'm pond fishing, and especially when I'm lake fishing during consistent weather time periods. Now, one of the other ones that I said could also work in the cooling water, and spoiler alert, it can work in the warming water category we're going to talk about, is the shallow diving crankbait. So the lipless crankbait, especially around grass, and the flat-sided crankbait around shallow rocks. Both of these work extremely well when you have fish that are kind of more used to their environment, especially in the afternoon. I talked about the flat-sided crankbait, I believe, in my Winter Masterclass, as well as in my uncut bass fishing episode that I will put on the screen right here, where I caught a a decent amount of fish and some big ones on the flat-sided crankbait during a consistent weather period. Now, the wind was blowing on that day, but it was not a cold wind, so it wasn't really changing the water all that much. The fish had been used to the cold, they were still used to it, and they bit shallow crankbaits better than a whole lot of other lures. And so on your body of water, you really got to test out what they want. But I will say one thing that most anglers don't think about is that when you have no wind, those fish can oftentimes be very, very finicky, especially if the water is clear. And so I didn't bring it, but I was gonna put a glide bait into this category. There's just something about a big bait fish presentation, especially in calm water, getting a big drawing power as it goes side to side to side. And I've caught some of my biggest bass ever in calm, consistent, cold water with and without forward-facing sonar. And of course, the drop shot works its way back in. When those bass are really, really finicky, the water is pretty dang cold. They either are high in the water column and a drop shot can catch them as it's falling down, or the bait fish, the forage are all sucked down to the bottom of your pond or lake, and there's really no other lure to catch them besides a drop shot. Now, I think in the B-roll shot, I had a deep diving crankbait lined up there. This one is not one that I throw often, and I'm not gonna really talk about it a whole lot because for most of y'all, the bodies of water you fish, whether in a kayak and especially from the bank, you can't even throw a deep diving crankbait. But I would say this does have its place, especially in scenarios when lots of guys are cranking around an Alabama rig. Tons of guys are throwing a jig head minnow or a drop shot. I caught one of the biggest deep crankbait bass of my life. Matter of fact, I think it was the biggest while I was filming the 10 Days for a 10 series as an 8-pounder in East Texas in the dead of winter when the wind was not blowing at all. Not really the scenario in which you think you throw a deep diving crankbait. It's kind of immediately thought of as like a summertime ledge fishing offshore rock pile deal. But if you've got calm, cold water, oftentimes fish are not seeing deep diving crankbaits. Matter of fact, I think about another example in the 10 Days for a 10 series where I found some giants on the base of trees. I couldn't get any other lure to trigger those fish besides a deep crank, and I lost an absolute giant that broke me off. Just looking at the size of it on live scope, it was no doubt an 8-10 pounder. So if you've got a tournament this February and the weather is what I've been describing, pull out the crankbait, you may be surprised by the results. Now, for many of us in the deep south especially, the later we go into February, it is very possible to have what is the best weather conditions possible. And therefore, when I say weather, I also mean in conjunction with what it does to the water temperature. And that is the daytime temperatures and the nighttime temperatures kind of staying in that high 40s to 60s, maybe even into the 70s during a few days in a row. And when that happens, you've got some really fun lures to fish, what I would call warming water conditions. Now in that shot, I think I included a suspending jerkbait because yes, it can still work, but go even shallower and retrieve it a little bit faster and less long pauses for sure. And then a shallow rigged, I would say 1/8 ounce maximum, Strike King 4.75 or 5.75 inch Raid swimmer can just catch the snot out of some big fish. I've had some early pre-spawn days that are just lights out on this bait right here. I've probably got them on the screen right now. Also the Mag Draft, the Zal Dangerous, just any kind of shallow fished boot tail, big paddle tail swim bait can absolutely catch fish. But my two favorites to throw during this time of the year, again, if you check Bass Forecast during these kind of conditions, you're gonna see that it says pre-spawn for sure, and that is the vibrating jig and the Colorado blade, and if not Colorado blade, it's like a hybrid style of spinnerbait. So 3/8, half ounce, hooked myself there, half ounce at a maximum. This here is, I believe, the KVD with double Colorado. One of my other favorites is the 5/16 ounce turtleback, I believe it is. I think it's only available on Tackle Warehouse. And by the way, this video, as always, the channel is brought to you by the links down there in the video description. Please shop for your tackle using those. It helps this continue to be my full-time job. But the reason why I love these two baits right here is because they are versatile in the ways that you can fish them. So you can fish them really fast or really slow. You can go higher in the water column or lower in the water column. And I think when you have a few warm days in a row, especially a little bit of ripple on the water, those fish may be getting up shallow, and I wouldn't say their minds are focused on spawning or even getting in that scenario, but they just know that the spawn is coming, and so they're gonna feed up because the entire ecosystem up shallow, based on a good few warm days and nights in a row, has gotten them in the position to do so without fear of crazy weather, thrashing the shallows they're living in and kind of killing off some stuff, because bass don't want to be in super versatile water. That's why I love a spinnerbait, especially if you're gonna pick out a spinnerbait color. A chartreuse and white is one that I throw almost all the time, unless it's clear water, and then it's more of like a translucent type of shad. But honestly, I'm throwing a vibrating jig a lot more in clear water. And one that you should be throwing is straight red. This here is the Tungsten Thunder Cricket in 1/2 ounce. This is probably the only month, besides maybe like June and July, when the bass are sitting on deeper grass, that I will go with a 1/2 ounce. I'm a huge 3/8 ounce Thunder Cricket guy, but if you're gonna go with a chatterbait Thunder Cricket during this month, I would say go with a 1/2, just to be able to fish a little bit deeper in either red, or get yourself a pink one, or buy your own pink skirt and make yourself a homemade pinky like I have. They catch some big old fish during this time of year. So that was the 3 main water temperatures I want to talk about, but the one that I feel like is applicable to a few of you guys out there, especially in Florida, South Alabama. I mean, it could happen potentially in the Carolinas or Georgia, Alabama, but for a few of y'all, you're gonna have that warming water closer to the end of this month. So I'm putting this out right now, February 2nd or 3rd, whatever, early this month. The full moon is next month, March 3rd, which means the very end, February 28th, is one of the days leading up to that full moon. And if you've got warming water leading up to a full moon in the spring, you could see some fish really shallow. Now, I'm not gonna go as far to say that you have a whole bunch of fish spawning, or that will be the biggest wave of the spawn. Probably the March and April waves of the spawn, really regardless of where you live, are going to be the biggest ones. Besides y'all up north, I would say April, May, and June are the bigger waves. But those fish could be up shallow, and they could be really shallow, preparing to spawn, staging up to spawn. And so I'm thinking about areas on a pond, like a laydown tree that's on the edge between the big open main lake and then kind of a backwater little channel that goes up somewhere. That kind of a tree could have a big fish sitting on it, especially in the afternoon, just kind of high in the water column, sunning itself, getting its body warm, to then eventually go back and spawn, potentially, if the weather stays warm, up until the full moon, because full moon, regardless of what some people say, does drive spawning activity to a certain extent, especially the few days before the full moon. And so the 2 lures that I had on there are a 1/2 ounce small flipping jig. I've got the Outcast Tackle Cage Fighter jig and the 6-inch Strike King Ocho. I only throw a 6-inch pretty much during the pre-spawn spawn time of the year. And if I'm like bed fishing, I'm usually throwing a 5-inch on a wacky rig, but a Texas rigged weightless 6-inch Ocho, this soft bait here is just so salt infused. It sinks fast enough. You don't need a weight on there. Maybe a 16th ounce if you want to, but this thing cast or pitched around shallow targets, a jig skipped around shallow boat docks, and again, especially ones that are in prime position to be where a bass would sit on the transition from their winter pre-spawn areas to where they're going to go spawn, which may not be on your lake or pond really far back in a creek. The bass may not travel 4 miles to go spawn. Matter of fact, bass aren't that dumb. They're not gonna do that. I think about Lake Murray in South Carolina. The biggest bass in that lake spawn right next to the main lake in shallow pockets by these huge main lake points. They just kind of swim up a few hundred yards, spawn, and go right back out to chasing herring. That happens on tons of lakes around the country, and for sure the ponds where you fish. Don't think the bass, especially during this potential wave of the spawn, are gonna be all over the crazy shallows. They might not be. And are all these lures potentially going to work during the 26th, 27th, 28th of this month? Absolutely, but don't discount a jig and a 6-inch stick bait, especially flipped around that deep boulders, the bigger chunk rock, the docks, the laydown sticks and stumps, especially the roots of stumps. All those locations are great places to find a big bass. I'm not saying you're gonna have a 20 fish day, but you may catch the biggest bass of your year who has not seen a lure up shallow yet, and one of these 2 may be the first lure he sees. and he eats it. So that has been my February lures recommendation video. My throat is killing me after talking. I guarantee you it's gotten worse throughout this video. I'm gonna go get some lemon tea and take a nap. But if you enjoyed this video, hit that subscribe button. It's a pleasure to make these videos for y'all. And it would also be awesome if you would stick around and watch another video. I will have my winter masterclass over here that I just discussed earlier on in the video, talking about all things winter fishing. And I've got my pre-spawn masterclass, which again, for some of y'all later on this month is gonna be extremely applicable. We talk about a lot of really good stuff in that video that I don't think anybody else has covered. That one will be clickable over here in this corner. My name's Tyler. It's a pleasure, and we'll see y'all next time right here, hopefully with a better sounding voice on TRF.